Hi there, Zelda here. I am coming to you with another weekly tarot. It is time to kind of look into some themes for the week ahead. It is going to be a pick a pile reading, as I'm going to do for the foreseeable future for the pick a piles, or for the weekly tarot. We'll do pick a piles because I love that this gives you an opportunity to trust your intuition, to decide what message is right for you. You can, of course, watch the whole thing if you feel like you want to have this overall view, but I really encourage you to kind of trust yourself. And so I'm going to show you three different crystal skulls, and you are going to pick the one that you feel most connected to, and then you will get to skip to that part of the video and receive your message. So I am going to show you the skulls, but first I want to just tell you about the three different decks that I am using. So for the tarot deck, I am going to be using the Numinous Tarot. I can show you the box. It is a really beautiful tarot deck. Look at how beautiful the box is. One of the things I really love about this deck, I'll do a review on it eventually, besides like the magical artwork, is that I love that they have a ton of diversity on the cards. There's a lot of different color skin for people. There's different size. There's different levels of ability. It's a deck that's very thoughtful and not, I think, just doing it to kind of speak to the moment or to sell more decks. Like, it feels like a very thoughtful incorporation of diversity, as well as they changed a couple of the cards to ones that I like the way that they altered the actual card to kind of invite out a different level of meaning. Another deck that I'm going to be using today is the Amenti Oracle. This is a deck that has some kind of like affirmations on it. It is, I will be honest, it's not necessarily my favorite deck. Like, if I were to recommend an Oracle deck, I wouldn't necessarily have this one at the top of my list, but I have a ton of decks. But I really love this one for its affirmation quality, and I think it has really beautiful, clean lines and nice overall aesthetic. I'll eventually do a review on all of these decks, but I'm just giving you the overview of the ones we're using. And then we're going to be using the Poesis Oracle. This is one of my all-time favorite Oracle decks, another Kickstarter one that I backed. And so that will be the third Oracle. Okay, now the first pile is going to be Menuka. Menuka is a star garnet. It's kind of hard to see how sparkly Menuka really is, but they're totally radiant. They're carved by Subhash Meena. So if you feel called to Menuka, yours is pile number 1. Pile number 2 is going to be Lettie. Lettie is a Flourite Skull. She's got a really sweet face. She is not from a known carver or a master carver, but she is very radiant. She sometimes appears as an elephant spirit. So if you feel connected to her, your pile is pile number 2. The third pile is going to be Haroun. Haroun is a clear quartz skull carved by Leandro de Souza, a master carver. So if you feel called to Haroun, your pile will be pile number 3. Okay, so we're going to transition into pile number 1. If you didn't choose pile number 1, please check in the description and you will find the timestamp for your individual pile. Okay, pile number 1, if you're still with me, you chose Menuka. And so I'm going to show you the different cards, and then we'll talk about a little bit about what that might mean for the week ahead, some themes and any messages or downloads that I receive, as well as maybe how Menuka as a a guide and a being ties in to this message. So the tarot card is the Three of Candles. Struggle is the Poesis Oracle. And I invoke laughter. So just to speak first to the tarot card, the Three of Wands, particularly in this representation, some of the messages that I am getting feel like they are around the way that these candles almost feel like lighthouses of a sort. They're kind of far off, but they're actually burning really brightly. There's this being who is like walking at the shore and maybe is kind of far away, and there's this kind of like crashing of the water on the rocks. And this is a card that I feel like in general, I feel like the threes sometimes speak to like a connective, integritous quality. But in this, these actually feel kind of more disparate. They're connected by like the water in between them. With the Three of Wands, in this deck, the candles are the wands. They're the element of fire. Let's see what message is feeling. I really get the sense of like, it's possible that you are starting to move forward on different projects or endeavors that you're excited about, that you're passionate about, and that it's possible at this point in the journey, taking a step back and seeing things from a distance may be a little bit challenging, like kind of wanting to just like dive into the fray. But I get the sense that like, especially with this card, the struggle, I get this quality of like, what is providing that lighthouse quality, providing you light so that you don't crash in to the rocky shore, so that as you're kind of moving up, it reminds me of, I think I might even said this in a reading before, but like when you're parallel parking or something and someone gets out of the car, to make sure you don't run into the car behind you. It kind of reminds me of that, right? Like giving a little bit of an adjustment and taking some of that feedback from a distance, even if it's asking for help or support, not feeling like you have to do everything on your own. Knowing that it can be an incredible burden to push this up. Like I think of like the Sisyphus. If you know Sisyphus, it's like the pushing the rock up the hill again and again. I can never remember how it's pronounced altogether as like an adjective, but that kind of turmoil that feels endless, that you just feel like you're going and going and going. And I get that quality of like, it's also possible that like you want to just dive headlong in and have things happen faster than is realistic. We don't have an idea for something and have it just like overnight become a fully fledged thing. Like I think of gestational periods or pregnancies, if we're speaking about humans, but any kind of animal that grows a being inside of it. It takes time to kind of construct that life and then to bring it and push it into the world. And so that is a thing that with the Three of Candles, I get that sense of like, it's okay to be tending those flames. They're very important, even if they are just kind of laying the groundwork for things to take place. Sometimes in this process, we can get the sense of like, biting off more than we can chew. Like I even think of like, this person is struggling, they're rolling kind of the head up the hill. I get this feeling of like mind over matter almost, but that also like how we think about something and how we relate to it transforms our experience about it. This is not to like reduce it to like, oh, we can just like think our way out of every single situation. No, but when we are dealing with the struggle, we can transform a little bit of the way that we're viewing it, and maybe not push and push and push against something, where we actually just need to redirect some of our energy and have it be a more transformative experience. Especially with this, I invoke laughter. This person is shaped in this very playful way. They are between these different beings that look like birds to me. Like these 4 different beings that are kind of, you can see these different ones. And it just feels very playful and natural. It feels like organic. And it also, like, when I think of the struggle, right, how can we invite a sense of like playfulness in and acknowledge like that when we laugh, we can almost like break the surface tension that is building on something that is a huge struggle or a huge challenge. And we can actually bring a little bit of levity and lightness. And I'm really struck by like the fact that they're birds and that this person almost seems as if they're like taking flight a little bit. It can actually bring that lightness and uplift us in a way that makes it feel like that is kind of like a beacon or a lighthouse lighting our way when it feels more dark. Finding a sense of humor in things. And this isn't to say necessarily like we always want to laugh at our problems, or that we want to use humor as like a coping mechanism to avoid experiencing our feelings. No, this is very different. It's like when we're frustrated, sometimes all there is to do is laugh. And that actually laughing at like, wow, this is kind of ridiculous that I'm struggling with this. Again, it's very difficult. Or, wow, it is a little ridiculous that I, started this project a month ago and already I'm feeling frustrated that it is incomplete. And I'm talking like longer term projects, not like baking a cake or something, right? Or, maybe it could be baking a cake if you're working on perfecting a recipe for a baking contest, right? Working on like, this doesn't have to be just creative. Sometimes your creative process could be writing code. It could be doing taxes. It could be coming up with a new system to be a manager at work. And all of those things take time. They take different processes and different systems. And so we kind of like offer that like, yes, maybe there is this long journey and proportionally it may feel kind of overwhelming, but we can take that lightness and it's a very like relational, uplifting quality. One of the ways that I feel like Menuka specifically ties into this is that Menuka, I don't know if you've ever tried like Menuka honey, but one of the reasons that Menuka chose their name is because they are here to support the inspiration of returning to the potent power of sweetness and delight in our life. And pleasure, I think of pleasure as like, how can pleasure be like a honey in like a bitter medicine or something to like balance it out of like you're experiencing something that is actually a big challenge in life, but then a little bit of like honey or something cuts some of the edge and makes it a little bit like, oh, it like opens and like lubricates that for you. And the laughter can actually be that, staying in a relational sense of humor with yourself, with spirit, with the people around you, in a difficult relationship. It's kind of like allowing that laughter and that connective element to be something that maybe alleviates a little bit of that struggle. I think that those are the messages that are coming through this week. Especially with this quality of fire with the 3 of Wands. earth and then air with this. I do get the quality of like it feeling kind of like a balancing act. I don't know why elementally that just kind of felt significant, that everything felt represented in these different cards. Oh, and even the water on the shore of this Three of Candles. And so seeking this quality of like, how can the light and the challenge be in relationship to each other? And you can allow the kind of like sweetness to balance that, or can allow yourself even to like return to the challenge if that's something that, you know, is feeling further away or you're feeling avoidant of. So that kind of also feels like a piece of like the balance. So that's your little affirmation if you would like to use it. I invoke laughter. I hope that that was supportive for you, pile one. Thank you so much and have an amazing week. We are going to get started with pile number 2. So if you are tuning in, this is pile number 2. You chose Lettie. Lettie has this really supportive and wise quality, oftentimes appears as an elephant, is very playful, very connected to the way that wisdom can be not just like a dominant cognitive wisdom, but also like a very embodied humanistic kind of wisdom. She feels very soothing to hold. I love holding Lettie and spending time with her. Okay, so let's go through your cards. The tarot card is the Three of Vials. The Poesis Oracle is Desire. And your Amenti Oracle, the affirmation is, I act respectfully of others. I act respectfully of others. So when I see all of these together, I really feel this quality of relationship very, very strongly. I really feel like the Three of Vials in this deck, vials are cups. The Three of Cups is oftentimes this card that speaks to relational connectedness. Lindsay Mack, I think, called it at one point like a card that reminds them of coven. And a lot of people talk about it being in community, relationally. It can be friendship oriented, but it can also be relationship with spirit. It can also be relationship with sacred dead, with ancestors. It can also be relationship with guides, with the earth. It can also be relationship with animals and pets. So it doesn't necessarily have to be reduced in any way to any sort of interpretation. One of the things I really love and notice about this card is how they're kind of pouring in, right? They're not just receiving, they're pouring into this cauldron that is full of this like sparkly, beautiful mixture. And they're each bringing their own they're slightly different shaped bottles. They're each bringing their own flavor, their own magic to add to this beautiful concoction. There's also this waterfall in the background and a rainbow. Overall, it's a very kind of joyous feeling card, which is okay if you're not necessarily feeling that way. But I'm just naming some of the imagery that is standing out to me at this particular point in relationship to this card. With this card of desire being close to this, I think about, are there ways in which you have been longing for community? Are there ways in which you've been longing for connection, for collaboration, for support of some kind? And how has that longing kind of grown and blossomed open in you? Sometimes when we want something for a long time, we can become resentful of not having it. We can become like bitter in a way, or if we want to be in like sacred and reciprocal relationship, we can get into this dynamic where we feel like I never have enough, or I give all of this to others, but I can't ever receive it for myself. And so when I think of this, I think of, I see this kind of it feels like with desire almost this like transmutation or something of a biblical interpretation of desire, with the snake kind of stemming up and reaching up and kind of elevating. I think of like kundalini rising and like tantric energy in this, as well as like the flower blossoming open in that part of the body in the kind of sacral chakra area. It feels like an igniting or something of that energy. It also feels like, because of that type of relationship to desire and companionship, that there could be this quality of like, what do we feel or think about other people? How do we stay in relationship with other people when the way that they express their desires are different from our own? Sometimes we have been taught to tamp down or to stomp down our desires and our wants and needs. And so, how can we actually like invite that kind of wild animal within us out to want what it wants and love what it loves? I love that poem, Wild Geese by Mary Oliver, where she says, you just have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. It's a beautiful long poem. That I highly recommend reading. That's something that maybe will resonate. Maybe that can be something, if you like this and resonate with this reading, maybe you can just go read some Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. And when I see this, I act respectfully of others. I do think there's a reason that I kind of named these ways that we can be in imbalanced relationship, because it's not like one of these people coming and bringing this potion and like dispersing it to everyone. It's not a parent cooking a meal for children and delivering it. It's not one person making every meal at the potluck, so to speak, right? Everyone's coming, everyone's offering and giving what they give, and that they're meeting each other, right? One of these isn't going all the way over here. There is an act of respectfulness in being in a sense of balance in giving and receiving. I think of this feather and rose crossed over in the middle, and this quality of like lightness and also of like earthiness. And I think of this balance and boundaries that roses have with their thorns, and this quality of like, I will be in relationship with you, and it is a respectful relationship that honors my and your boundaries, our boundaries, and how those fit together. Let's see what Lettie might have to offer. We have a lot of stories about how we are supposed to be in relationship. And one of the things that I saw with Lettie is that there's this kind of like familiarity that we feel sometimes when we see other animals express affection, when our mind recognizes something that isn't just us as expressing things that are like us. When elephants will curl their trunk around someone, right? It feels almost like wrapping an arm, but of course it's a different part of their body, right? It's a different way that they engage with the world. And it really makes me think of how sometimes we have to relearn and reconnect and remember how we express connection. We can sometimes feel like, I don't know how to reach out and connect. I don't know how to ask for help. I don't know how to receive or how to give in the right way. And that these are things, being in a relationship is a very beautiful inherent quality. And we learn sometimes, especially when I think of like neurodivergent folks or folks who relate differently in a way that is not perhaps mainstream or what we're told relationships should look like, or people who inhabit the margins relationally in some way or another, and that somehow they're taught that like they don't know how to be in relationship and they need to learn how to do it better. And really, I want to like push back against this, that like being in relationship is one of the most fundamental things that we understand as beings. And just because some people do it differently than others, and maybe you would like to do it differently than others, there's nothing wrong with that, actually. And this is a huge world, full of so many different people, and there are other people in this world who absolutely will share your perspective. You are not the only person. If you want to, I think of working with people who would like to be in polyamorous or open relationships, or want to love in a different way, or have a different sexual orientation or relationship to gender, or relationship to how they want to be in relationship with self and other. And the beautiful part of living in an era, there's a lot of challenges of living in an era where the internet exists, and technology has a lot of issues. But one of the benefits is we can connect to so many different people, and you're not alone in your experience. Even if you haven't found anyone on the internet that you connect to, they exist. You are unique in so many ways, but you are also not in so many ways. You are connected. You are uniquely important, and inexplicably valuable to the world, as well as like not alone in your experience. And so that is a really big feeling of this that I'm getting, is just this kind of like liberatory quality of expressing desire, how to be in respectful relationship with yourself and others, and how to kind of stay engaged in that sacred community. And yeah, if you feel connected to elephants, that could be some imagery that you look up and connect to in a different way. Yeah, I think that is it for you, group 2. Thank you so much. I hope that you have a beautiful week. We are going to move along to group 3. Welcome, group 3. If you are here, it is because you chose Haroun. I love Haroun. Haroun is, I love all of these skulls. They're all of the beings that I work with. So I always am like, I love the one you chose, but of course I do, right? But Haroun is, loves to work in a creative way to help engage with other dimensional worlds that are also creative landscapes for you. So if you are working on a project or a creative endeavor, working with his type of energy can feel really, really useful. Let's take a look at your cards. So the first card is Awakening. This replaces the Judgment card in other decks. It's the card right before the World card, 20. You can see XX, Awakening. And I really, really love this card in particular, this kind of interpretation. I think it's really beautiful. I think it has a lot to offer, and I'm really excited to kind of talk about how it fits in today. Your Poesis Oracle card is Soften. Soften. And your Amenti Oracle affirmation is, I affirm that all life is sacred. I affirm that all life is sacred. So, in relationship to the Awakening card, I love this because it makes me think of Plato's allegory of the cave. You can kind of take that for what it is, but it's this idea of like these shadows playing out on a wall of beings, and they're kind of like shadows. And until someone thinks to turn around and venture out of the cave, the shadows themselves are the reality to the people in the cave. And so this reorientation to taking the leap to go and seek outside of the cave. And now before anyone comes at me, I know that that's not the full extent. This is obviously a tiny snippet of that. You can look into that kind of like theoretical journey. journey of that text on your own and all of the myriad of different interpretations and values that it offers. I'm just kind of naming this kind of imagery that comes to mind and the story that pops into my mind with this. And this feels like this kind of bravery, right? Of there being this walking out into the light and out of the ledge. And I imagine that behind this person, there are shadows playing out. There is a scene playing out, and they are turning and orienting away to go and see where that comes from, to go and put those different pieces together to see the greater whole. And that is why I love the word awakening, because I feel like judgment, even though it is such an important card in many ways to reintegrate the meaning of that word, I also feel like awakening has this different quality to it doesn't feel like a criticism of any kind. We don't have to like reprogram our orientation to that word to be able to take in the full meaning of it. And so it feels very much like courageous in this way to kind of put together the pieces, but also like if we're using that kind of like shadow and then the person making the shadow, both of those come together to create different perspectives and different realities, and we're kind of opening to the larger image and putting together pieces. And this kind of awakeness can come with all sorts of different qualities. When we walk into the light after being in the dark for a while, it can like hurt our eyes, right? There can be that kind of like blinding quality to it. And so in that, I think of this kind of like waking up in a way that can be most gentle and loving for ourselves. With this card, especially in combination with the soften, I think of how we can melt away and soften our different resistances to change, our resistance to waking up, our resistance to seeing things clearly, our resistance to growing. Growing is a really difficult process, right? People have a lot of, reasonably so, a lot of pushback against change because our mind doesn't love change. Our mind operates really well on systems of safety to keep us safe. Things that are familiar actually feel a lot safer to our mind, so that it can split things into good, bad, safe, unsafe, unsafe. But actually staying the same, even though maybe our brain naturally wants us to kind of be able to pin things down. And we live in a world where there is such an accelerated sense of unsafety for many people, that we actually need to reorient towards like, how do we hold our own growth really gently and softly and kind of courageously walk towards our own light in that way. And in this, there's this melting away and also this relationship to this little flower. I just see that with, I affirm that all life is sacred. I think of this being kind of like melting and becoming a different shape, having that fire burning within them and becoming that different shape as they soften around it, and holding and having this kind of reverence and beauty for this small flower. And I think of like what seeds are being planted, what seeds are growing for you in your life that you are softening more to be in better relationship with, or in deeper relationship, I suppose, rather than better relationship with. I affirm that all life is sacred. Especially here, I see this dragonfly. And I think of dragons. I also think of, for some reason in this context, I think of like the little creepy crawlies and small beings that actually make huge differences in our world. I think of the idea that like the butterfly effect, where the batting of the wings of a butterfly can actually like start a storm, and this quality that each little tiny being, no matter how small, no matter how insignificant it may seem to someone else, has this ripple effect, and we all kind of are in this relationship and this matrix connected to each other, including the trees and including the ground that we walk on, and including the beings in this world that we feel like we don't like or have anything in relationship to. I think of the immense amount of micro life that make up the biomes in our guts and in our stomachs and in our bodies that like help us engage with the world. With Haroun here, I really think about how our stories are interconnected. I think about how sometimes the way that we express to others is through metaphor. Metaphor, I mean, most of us use metaphors uh, every day, so many times, right? But they're effective because of their proximity to the truth, not because of their literal factual truth. So when we say, felt as if I got hit by a truck, because we got some news, right? Some intense news, and it just like laid us out. We're not saying that we literally got hit by a truck. We're saying the immense and the impact of that felt so intense. And other people can kind of feel it, right? We can say getting challenging news is like a punch to the gut, and we can kind of almost like feel it land in our body. And I think of that, right, is like, how do we tell stories and how do we describe to other people and speak to the people around us in a way that they can understand? Right? If this person was going back to someone and trying to tell them to come into the light, these people have never seen what's out there. They can't possibly know how you might describe it literally. You need to use language that they can understand. You also might need to soften and rest in your defenses and in your sense of urgency to be able to relate. I think of with Haroun, I think of being able to tell stories that make a huge impact. I think of the way that the art we make actually makes an incredible difference, and other people being able to be awake to things that are important, how we engage with like sense of justice and what we want in the world, and how we kind of like create that sense of emotion and evoke a sense of understanding, even if someone hasn't experienced something personally themselves. And beautiful art can kind of do that. It can kind of like soften us. It can, as I think Rumi said, it can like break our heart open so that the light can enter. I affirm that all life is sacred. How do you remind that? Remind yourself of that. So I think that is your message this time. If you feel called to look into dragonflies, that could be an image that maybe could carry you through a little bit that came up. Thinking about how to settle into your process a little bit. And as you are in this this feels a little bit more momentous. And I think about how this time might be bringing forth something that is really impactful for you. And that softening into that process and holding that with reverence can also be a way to kind of be affirming that all life is sacred, including your own, right? Including your own. Thank you so much, Group 3. I hope that you have a beautiful week. To all groups 1, 2, and 3, I am so grateful to get to share this space with you a little bit, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Yeah, until then, bye.